In the blink of an eye, America's princess became America's most wanted. Patricia Hearst abducted heiress, who transformed from captive to criminal in just 57 days. How does a privileged 19-year-old metamorphose into a bank-robbing revolutionary, calling herself Tania? Tonight, we'll dissect this psychological mystery through the penetrating lens of Carl Jung, revealing the shadow forces that can transform any of us under the right conditions. What you're about to discover isn't just about Patty Hearst, about the fragile construct we call identity, and the darkness that lurks in each of our psyches, waiting for its moment to emerge. Before we dive into this fascinating psychological case study, take a second to hit subscribe and the notification bell, so you don't miss our exploration of the human psyche's darkest corners. Drop a like and share this video with someone who appreciates the mysteries of the mind. I promise, the revelations ahead will fundamentally transform how you understand not just Patty Hearst, but your own psychological vulnerabilities. Leave a comment below. Do you believe anyone could be transformed, like Patty was, given the right circumstances? 19-year-old Patricia Hearst, granddaughter of media titan William Randolph Hearst, is dragged screaming from her apartment by members of the Symbionese Liberation Army, a radical leftist group determined to wage war against what they called the fascist insect that preys upon the people. For the next 57 days, Patty is kept blindfolded in a closet measuring just 2 feet by 6 feet, repeatedly raped, and subjected to relentless political indoctrination. If we view this scenario through Jung's analytical psychology, we immediately encounter what he would call a psychic death, the complete annihilation of Patty's previous identity structure. Jung believed that the psyche, like nature, abhors a vacuum. When an identity is destroyed, something must take its place. Mum, Dad, I'm okay, ... This first recorded message revealed a young woman still clinging to her original identity. But the psychological process had already begun. What Jung would identify as her persona, the social mask we present to the world, was being systematically stripped away. Asterisk, in Jungian terms, Patty's kidnappers created perfect conditions for what he called psychic possession. By isolating her completely from her previous reality, they removed all the social mirrors that had previously reflected and reinforced her identity as Patricia Hearst, wealthy heiress. College student, fiancé, the leader of the SLA, Donald DeFreeze, who called himself Field Marshal Sink, would have represented what Jung termed the shadow archetype in Patty's psyche, furthering her conscious personality rejected. Violent, revolutionary, marginalized, and operating outside societal norms. In Genjin psychology, the shadow contains all the repressed aspects of ourselves that we refuse to acknowledge. What makes this case so fascinating from a Genjin perspective is how quickly Patty's transformation occurred. On April 3, 1974, just 2 months after her abduction, a recording was released where Patty announced she had joined the SLA, adopted the revolutionary name, Tania, and renounced her family. 12 days later, security cameras captured Patty participating in an armed robbery of the Hibernia Bank in San Francisco. The footage shocked America. The victim had seemingly become the perpetrator. Jung would likely see this not merely as brainwashing, but as something far more profound: the emergence of the shadow into consciousness. Under extreme trauma, the boundaries between conscious and unconscious can dissolve. What Jung called the transcendent function, the psyche's attempt to reconcile opposites, was operating in a distorted, survival-oriented manner. This brings us to one of Jung's most unsettling insights. Within each of us lies the potential for our opposite. The privileged can become the revolutionary. The victim can become the perpetrator. This is not just about Patty Hearst, it's about the inherent instability of human identity that we all prefer to deny. America was divided over a fundamental question: was Patty Hearst a victim or a willing terrorist? The legal system, based on rational assumptions about stable identity and free will, struggled to categorize her. But Jung would argue that this binary thinking misses the profound complexity of the human psyche. Jung's concept of autonomous complexes provides a framework for understanding what might have happened within Patty's mind. These are emotionally charged clusters of ideas that can split off from conscious control and function independently within the psyche. Under extreme trauma, these complexes can even develop into distinct subpersonalities. Tania, in this framework, wasn't simply a role Patty was playing, it was a psychological complex that had gained autonomy within her fragmented psyche, complete with its own beliefs, emotions, and behavioral patterns. During those 57 days in captivity, Patty Hearst underwent what Jung would describe as a forced night sea journey, a descent into the unconscious that typically occurs during intense psychological transformation. But unlike the therapeutic journey, Jung advocated hers was coerced and designed to break rather than heal. Consider the psychological environment: complete sensory deprivation with occasional shocking interruptions. The blindfold removed only 4 ideological lessons. Physical abuse, alternating with moments of care. Sexual assault, presented as revolutionary love. This is the perfect recipe for what Jung called abasement du niveau mental, a lowering of mental awareness where conscious defenses crumble and the unconscious floods in. Jung would have been particularly interested in the symbolic role of the closet. Enclosed dark spaces represent the unconscious in Jungian dream analysis. Patty was literally forced into a physical manifestation of her own psychic depths, a space where her conscious identity had no resources to maintain itself. SLA understood psychological manipulation intuitively. They bombarded Patty with a new symbolic language, their 7-headed cobra symbol, revolutionary terminology, and a completely alternative worldview. From a Jungian perspective, they were providing new archetypal content to fill the void created by destroying her previous identity structure. What makes this case profound from a Jungian standpoint is the archetypal dimension. Jung believed that beneath our personal unconscious lies the collective unconscious, a shared psychological substrate containing universal patterns he called archetypes. The SLA activated powerful archetypal energies within Patty through several mechanisms. First, they triggered what Jung called the death and rebirth archetype. This ancient pattern exists across cultures. The old self must symbolically die for the new self to emerge. The SLA enacted this through ritual elements, renaming her Tania after Che Guevara's comrade, burning her clothes, cutting her hair. These symbolic acts speak directly to the unconscious mind, signaling that Patricia Hearst had died and Tania was born. Second, they activated the shadow archetype, not just in presenting themselves as her shadow, but in positioning her wealthy family as the shadow of society. In Jungian terms, they inverted her entire moral universe, making what was once good privilege, wealth, into something evil, and what was evil, violence, revolution, into something righteous. Third, the male SLA members, particularly Sync, would have engaged what Jung called her animus, the masculine aspect within the female psyche. Under normal circumstances, the animus can be a positive force for assertiveness and intellectual development. But when activated through trauma and sexual assault, it became distorted into identification with the aggressor. Jung's concept of psychic inflation helps explain another aspect of Patty's transformation. As she adopted the revolutionary identity, there's evidence she experienced a kind of psychological inflation, suddenly believing herself important to world revolution, privileged to have been chosen by the SLA. This inflation often accompanies archetypal possession, as the individual psyche merges with the power of the archetype. After 19 months as a fugitive, Patricia Hearst was finally captured in San Francisco. On September 18, 1975, the woman who emerged was neither fully Patricia nor entirely Tania, but a psyche in profound fragmentation, exactly what Jung would have anticipated after such extreme psychological trauma. Death to the fascist insect that preys upon the life of the people, she declared when asked her occupation during booking a statement that shocked the public. From a Jungian perspective, this wasn't merely defiance, but evidence of what he called psychic possession. The revolutionary complex continued to speak through her, even when it was clearly against her self-interest. What followed was one of the most fascinating legal dramas in American history, not just because of the circumstances, but because it forced the legal system to confront a profound psychological question that Jung had long contemplated. To what extent are we continuous, unified selves responsible for our actions across time? The legal system assumes a continuous self with stable decision-making faculties. Jung would find this assumption problematic in Patty's case. His understanding of the psyche as fundamentally plural rather than singular challenges the very foundation of legal culpability in cases of extreme trauma. During her psychiatric evaluations, Patty displayed sudden shifts in affect speech patterns, and even handwriting evidence of what Jung called cryptomnesia, where memories become dissociated from conscious awareness. When shown bank robbery footage, she observed her actions as if watching a stranger, stating, "That's not me," a response that would have made perfect sense to Jung. The media painted her as either a manipulative revolutionary or a helpless victim. Jung would see both portrayals as projections of our collective discomfort with psychological complexity. We desperately want clean categories, good or evil, sane or insane, because acknowledging the potential for psychological fracturing threatens our sense of stable selfhood. When the jury found Patty guilty of bank robbery on March 20, 1976, they were effectively rejecting the idea that her transformation was complete enough to remove responsibility. Jung might question this reasoning. His work on autonomous complexes suggests that under sufficient psychological pressure, aspects of the psyche can operate independently of the executive self without conscious consent. During her 2 years in prison, after President Carter commuted her sentence, Patty began the difficult process Jung would call reintegration. Separated from both her original social context and her SLA indoctrinators, she existed in a psychological limbo, an opportunity for what Jung termed individuation, the process of developing the individual personality. The woman who emerged from prison in 1979 presented yet another persona, neither the socialite, Patricia, nor the revolutionary, Tania, but someone attempting to integrate these fragmented aspects of herself. She married her bodyguard, took his name, and retreated into privacy in an attempt to establish a third position. The final chapter of Patty's story reveals what Jung would call the compensatory function of the psyche, its attempt to restore balance after extreme deviation. After her release and eventual presidential pardon in 2001, Patty constructed a life that appeared remarkably conventional: marriage, motherhood, philanthropy. Yet Jung would note that this wasn't simply a return to her pre-kidnapping self. Jung's most profound insight about trauma is that it cannot be erased, only integrated. The Tania complex didn't disappear. Rather, it was assimilated into a larger, more differentiated personality structure. The ultimate Jungian lesson from the Patty Hearst case is this: the self is not a fixed entity, but a dynamic process, constantly being created and recreated through the integration of conscious and unconscious material. Her transformation reveals not just the darkness of human psychology, but also its remarkable adaptability. As Jung himself wrote, the psychological rule says that when an inner situation is not made conscious, it happens outside, as fate. Patty Hearst's fate became a mirror reflecting our collective psychological vulnerabilities, a reminder that the boundary between victim and perpetrator, self and other, is far more permeable than we care to admit. Thank you for exploring this dark psychological case study with us. If you found value in this Jungian analysis, please subscribe and share this video with others interested in the depths of human psychology. Leave a comment below. Do you believe anyone could undergo such a profound transformation under similar circumstances? Until next time, remember Jung's warning that knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people.